A silent plea in ASL jolted me awake. My revenge revealed cheated files and my father's lost medal. I was 31 and a logistics officer at Fort Liberty, North Carolina. My job was moving supplies, managing contracts, and making sure soldiers got what they needed. Most mornings were the same: check emails, handle shipments, walk the supply yard. On that Tuesday in October, I was assigned to help at the base visitor center because a shipment had been delayed and my schedule was light. It wasn't glamorous duty, but it kept me out of the office for a few hours. The visitor center at Fort Liberty is busy, especially early in the week. Contractors, retirees, family members, and soldiers on leave all funnel through one small building to get passes or paperwork signed. It's noisy, radios crackling, printers running, people talking over each other, the kind of place where you can disappear if you keep your head down. That was my plan until I saw him. He was standing near the reception desk, a man in his 70s with a posture that still looked military. His haircut was neat, his jacket pressed, his shoes polished. He held a folder of papers in one hand and looked around with a mix of confusion and frustration. The receptionist was busy with 3 people at once, and the security guards were scanning IDs. People walked right past him as if he wasn't there. At first, I assumed he was just lost. Then, I noticed the way he was moving his lips without sound and gesturing with his free hand. It wasn't random waving. It was the beginning of fingerspelling. He was trying to sign to someone who didn't understand. No one stopped. Nobody even looked up. I thought of all the times I'd watched my father's old friends, men who had given decades to the army, stand in line at a VA clinic waiting for someone to help them. I thought of the frustration on my little brother's face when strangers pretended not to see him signing at the grocery store. Learning ASL had started as a way to talk to my brother and some of Dad's friends. Over the years, it had become second nature. My first instinct was to stay at my desk. It wasn't my job to play receptionist. My supervisor had told me clearly, help with visitor packets, don't interfere with security or admin. But the man's shoulders were slumping. He looked like he'd been standing there for a while. I pushed back my chair, walked over, and got his attention with a small wave. I signed, hello, my name is June, can I help you? The change on his face was instant. His eyes widened with relief and then softened into a smile. He signed back, hands moving with practiced ease. Thank you. I was beginning to think no one here could understand me. What do you need? I signed. I'm looking for the records office, he replied. They told me to check in here first, but I can't get past security. The young woman at the desk is very busy. I nodded and signed. Do you have an appointment? He shook his head. I'm trying to find old unit records. I'm an Army retiree. My name is Arthur Bellamy. That name hit me like a flash, but I kept my face neutral. What unit? I asked. 504th Parachute Infantry, he signed. I served with a man named Miles Whitaker. Do you know that name? Yes, I signed back, feeling my pulse jump. He was my father. Arthur's eyebrows rose. You're Miles's daughter? I nodded again. He hesitated, then signed slowly. Your father was a good man. He should have received more than he did. I swallowed hard. You're here about him? He lifted his folder. I have documents, photos, and a few statements from other men. I've been trying to get his record corrected for years, but no one answers my letters. I thought if I came in person, maybe someone would finally listen. The noise of the visitor center seemed to fade for a moment. I gestured for him to follow me to an empty corner where we could sit. We kept signing. He explained how accommodation for my father had been approved but never awarded, how certain paperwork had disappeared in 2001 when a contractor handled the transition to digital files. I asked if he'd submitted a standard Form 180. He said yes multiple times with no response. He had even tried the Inspector General's hotline. Nothing. He wasn't angry, just tired. I'm sorry you've had trouble, I signed. Let me see what I can do. Arthur smiled again, but it was faint. I don't want to cause problems for you. I know you're on duty. I'm here to serve people like you. I signed back. Let me at least get you to the right office. We walked toward the reception desk together. I showed the guard my ID and explained that I was escorting a retiree with a communication barrier. The guard waved us through without fuss. I guided Arthur toward a row of chairs so he could wait while I called ahead. As I reached for the phone, I had the prickling sensation of being watched. I glanced up at the second-floor balcony. Standing behind the glass was General Leonard Huxley, the commanding general of the 18th Airborne Corps. He was looking straight at us. Our eyes met for half a second before he turned away. My stomach tightened. I dialed the records office and asked if someone could come down to meet Mr. Bellamy. The clerk said they were backed up, but would send a staffer as soon as possible. I returned to Arthur and signed. It may be a few minutes. Would you like some water? Yes, thank you, he signed. I handed him a bottle and sat down across from him. He began telling me about my father's stories I'd never heard, how Miles had pulled 2 men out of a collapsed building during a training accident, how he'd mentored younger paratroopers, how the unit had nominated him for an award that vanished in a paperwork shuffle. I listened, asked questions, and translated for a few curious staffers who came by. Some of them stayed to shake Arthur's hand, others just nodded and moved on. The receptionist gave me a look that said I was off task, but she didn't interrupt. Arthur's hands moved steadily, his expressions clear. He described sending packets of evidence to different offices only to have them ignored. He wasn't looking for money. He wanted my father's records set straight before more of the old unit passed away. You're the first person here who has really listened. He signed. I wish I could do more, I replied. But maybe this is a start. He smiled at that. Miles would be proud of you. I felt a sting behind my eyes, but kept my composure. My phone buzzed with a message from my supervisor reminding me about a supply report. I ignored it. Right now, this mattered more. The clerk from the records office finally arrived, a young sergeant with a tablet. I introduced Arthur, interpreted his request, and handed over the folder of documents. The sergeant promised to review it and set up an appointment for Arthur to meet with someone from personnel records later in the week. Arthur thanked me repeatedly, signing his gratitude as we stood. I told him I would follow up personally and gave him my work email. He hesitated before taking it, as if he didn't want to be a burden. You're not a burden, I signed. This is my job. As he walked toward the exit, I caught sight of the balcony again. The general was still there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He stayed just long enough for me to know it wasn't an accident. Then he turned and disappeared into the hallway. I stood in the visitor center, holding Arthur's empty water bottle, my heart beating faster than it had during any jump or convoy. I didn't know what, if anything, the general's attention meant. All I knew was that a simple hello in sign language had just set something in motion I couldn't yet name. My fingers were still tingling from signing when I left the visitor center and headed for the small break room. I poured lukewarm coffee into a paper cup and tried to shake off the odd charge in the air. I just helped a deaf veteran with my father's name on his lips, and the 4-star general had been staring down at us like a hawk. Before I could even take a sip, a shadow appeared at the door. Arthur Bellamy stood there, folder tucked under his arm. He had refused a ride and had walked back in after stepping outside. I waved him in and pointed at a chair. He sat, and before I knew it, we were signing again. He told me he didn't usually open up to strangers, but seeing my name tag had made him stop. He spelled WHITAKER in slow, careful fingers. Your father saved my life, he signed. I looked down at the table. He never talked about that. I signed back. Arthur gave a small, tight smile. He wouldn't. That was the kind of man he was. He opened the folder and slid a few photocopied pages toward me. Commendation drafts, witness statements, a grainy photo of my dad in fatigues, grinning with his arm around 2 younger soldiers. We nominated him for a Distinguished Service Medal. Arthur signed, paperwork approved. Then it vanished. We think a contractor mishandled the files. After that, the Army said no record existed. I felt heat rising in my face. My family lost his supplemental benefits when that happened. I signed. My sister said there was nothing we could do. Arthur's hands slowed. Your sister? She's older. She handled the finances after my father died. She always told me to leave it alone. He nodded like he'd heard that story before. People give up because the system wears them down. He signed. I didn't want to give up. That's why I'm here. I studied the documents. They weren't dramatic. No smoking gun, but there was enough to warrant a review if someone actually looked. Have you gone through the VA's Office of Inspector General? I asked aloud, then signed. Yes, 3 times. They sent form letters back. No action. I leaned back, feeling the cheap plastic chair creak. Everything about this situation felt like a crossroads I hadn't planned for. I thought of the years I'd spent in the Army, moving crates and signing off on invoices, staying out of trouble, doing what I was told. And here was this old paratrooper fighting for a name in a file. I'm in a position now where I might be able to help. I signed carefully. No promises, but I can at least get your paperwork into the right hands. Arthur blinked hard. Why would you risk that? Because it's my father's name, too, I signed. For a moment, we just sat there, hands still. The hum of the vending machine filled the space. He reached across the table and tapped the photo. He was proud of you. He signed. He talked about you learning sign language when everyone else gave up. I know. I pressed my lips together. My father had taught me about logistics, checklists, and making sure people had what they needed. I taught myself ASL because of my little brother, but now it felt like all of it had been leading here. Arthur slid the folder back into his bag. I don't want to cause you trouble, but if you find anything, let me know, even if it's bad news. I will, I signed. I promise. We both stood. I walked him out to the parking lot where his old pickup was parked between two government sedans. He opened the door slowly, his hands stiff from old injuries. Before he climbed in, he signed one last thing. Don't let them scare you. I watched him drive away and felt the weight of those words settle on my shoulders. Back inside, the visitor center had thinned out. The receptionist gave me a pointed look and said, "Your supervisor's been calling for you." I nodded and kept walking. On my way back to my office, I passed the stairwell up to the command wing. The glass doors were closed, but I caught a glimpse of General Huxley moving down the hall talking to his aide. For a second, I wondered if he would stop me, ask about the veteran, but he didn't even glance my way. I swiped into my office and sat at my desk. The computer screen glowed with spreadsheets waiting for my approval. I clicked through them on autopilot, but my mind was elsewhere. Arthur's folder, my father's missing commendation, Paige's voice telling me for years to leave it alone. I opened a browser and typed Army Awards Lost Records Contractor 2001. Pages of obscure forum posts and old news articles popped up. One headline caught my eye: Audit finds gaps in digitized personnel files. The article named a private contractor, Trident Apex Systems, as having mishandled thousands of records during a transition period. I felt a jolt. That name was familiar from my work in logistics. Trident Apex Systems held several current supply contracts at Fort Liberty. I opened the contract database and searched. Sure enough, they were still active with millions in billing. I stared at the screen, trying to slow my breathing. This was bigger than a lost medal. It was a pattern. A knock on my door snapped me out of it. Major Colin Breyer, my section head, leaned in. "Whitaker, General Huxley wants to see you in his office tomorrow morning." My stomach dropped. Did he say why? "No," Breyer said. "But he noticed what you did at the visitor center. That's not a reprimand. He just said he wants to talk." I nodded, keeping my face neutral. Breyer left without further explanation. I closed the contract database and locked my screen. In the quiet office, the fluorescent lights buzzed. I rubbed my hands over my face. Helping a deaf veteran should have been a small, decent act, nothing more. Yet somehow it had pulled a thread that led straight into my father's shadow and a 4-star general's attention. I looked at the photo of my dad taped inside my notebook. For the first time in years, I wondered if he'd left more behind than old uniforms and a folded flag. The clock on the wall read 1700. I stood, gathered my things, and headed out of the building, the autumn air cool against my face. Soldiers were jogging past on their way to evening PT, boots pounding in rhythm. Somewhere, a bugle was playing retreat. I walked to my car without looking back at the command wing. My phone buzzed with a message from Paige asking if I could come home that weekend to help with Mom's appointments. I typed back a short yes and slipped the phone into my pocket. Driving off base, I kept replaying Arthur's hands, spelling my father's name. Every movement felt like a small alarm going off. I didn't know yet what tomorrow's meeting would bring, but I could already feel something shifting under my feet. The next morning, my boots clicked against the polished hallway outside the command wing. The air smelled like fresh paint and coffee. I had never been called upstairs before, and now I was on my way to meet a 4-star general with nothing but a cryptic message from my boss. My palms were sweating inside regulation gloves. A sergeant outside the office gestured for me to wait. "The general's finishing a call," he said quietly. Through the frosted glass, I saw the silhouette of General Leonard Huxley moving back and forth, tall and deliberate, a low rumble of voice. When the door opened, Major Breyer stepped out and nodded at me. "Go in, Lieutenant." I squared my shoulders and entered. General Huxley stood behind his desk, but didn't sit. His office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the parade field. No plaques on the walls, just a large map of supply routes pinned with colored flags. "Lieutenant Whitaker," he said. "Sit." I sat on the edge of the chair. He stayed standing, arms folded. "I watched you in the visitor center yesterday," he said. "You handled a difficult situation without being told. You speak American Sign Language." "Yes, sir." "Why?" "My brother's deaf, sir, and my father's old unit had several hearing-impaired retirees. I wanted to communicate with them." His expression didn't change, but something softened around his eyes. "That skill isn't common in this command," he said. "Yesterday, you made a visitor feel like he mattered. I need more of that." I stayed silent, unsure where this was going. He walked around the desk and leaned against it. "We have a problem with contract oversight. Logistics files are a mess. Auditors from the Inspector General's office are crawling through everything, but they don't understand how our supply chain really works. We're standing up a temporary transparency task force to clean house. I want you on it." My throat went dry. "Sir, I'm a line officer. My job is moving boxes." He interrupted. "You've been moving boxes for years. This is your chance to use your brain." "Yes, sir." "You'll report to Major Breyer for admin, but have direct access to me. You'll see data most lieutenants never touch. We're starting immediately." I took a breath. "What exactly do you want me to do?" "Review contracts, identify irregularities, and cut through excuses. You're not part of the old guard, so you're not tied to anyone's mistakes. We need fresh eyes. You'll be our point of contact for retirees and whistleblowers who come forward." I thought of Arthur Bellamy sitting in the visitor center, folder in his lap. "Sir, that veteran yesterday?" "I know who he is," Huxley said. "And I know who your father was. This isn't about sympathy. This is about integrity. Can you handle that?" "Yes, sir," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Good. You'll start by reviewing our current vendors, especially Trident Apex Systems." My heart kicked. "Trident Apex, sir." "Yes. They've been on base since the early 2000s. Too many sole source awards, not enough competition. I want to know why." "I can do that," I said. "Major Breyer will brief you on access credentials." He straightened, dismissed. I stood. As I reached the door, he added, "Lieutenant, what you did yesterday was the army I joined. Don't lose that." Outside, Breer was waiting with a folder. "Congrats," he said without much warmth. "You're now the lowest-ranking person with the highest clearance in this building. Don't screw it up." We walked to a small, secure office down the hall. "This is your workstation," he said, pointing at a desk with a government laptop. "No phones, no personal email. You'll start with this list of contracts. Flag anything that smells off, and keep your mouth shut. Nobody likes auditors, especially when they're wearing the same uniform." I sat down and opened the laptop. Rows of contract numbers filled the screen. Trident Apex appeared again and again. Millions of dollars for everything from vehicle parts to IT support. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Any questions?" Breer asked. "Will I have authority to contact retirees directly?" "Yes. The general wants you to be the friendly face. Everyone else on this team is a lawyer or an accountant. You're the soldier." He left me with a key card and a stack of NDAs to sign. The rest of the morning blurred into data. I cross-checked invoices, delivery logs, and bid sheets. Patterns began to emerge. Same vendors winning without competition. Payments routed through shell LLCs. It wasn't proof of wrongdoing, but it was sloppy enough to be suspicious. At lunch, I stepped outside for air. Soldiers were marching past with rucksacks, sweat glistening on their necks. I leaned against a railing and thought of my father. He had believed in rules and order. He'd also believed that the army took care of its own. My phone buzzed with a text from Paige. Mom's appointment changed to Saturday. "Can you still come?" I typed back. "Yes," she replied. "Don't be late." I slipped the phone away and headed back in. By mid-afternoon, I was deep in contract numbers when I found something odd. A series of consulting fees paid from Trident Apex to an outside LLC based in Fayetteville. The LLC's name made my stomach clench. Sutton Strategic Advisors, Paige's married name. I double-checked the address. It matched a small office park off Skibo Road. My sister's company had never come up in conversation except vague mentions of doing some work for contractors. I sat back in the chair, pulse hammering. If this was what it looked like, my sister was getting money from a defense contractor under scrutiny. A knock at the door startled me. Breyer poked his head in. "The general wants a preliminary briefing tomorrow morning. Have something he can use." "Understood, sir," I said. He left. I stared at the screen. This wasn't just about my father's lost medal anymore. It was about my family's name tied to a contractor the general suspected. I printed the relevant pages and slid them into a secure folder. Then I logged off and locked the laptop. Walking out of the building, the sun was lower over the parade field. A helicopter thudded overhead. I felt like someone had swapped my steady logistics job for a live grenade. I got in my car and sat for a long moment, hands on the wheel. My sister's text from earlier glowed on the screen. I could almost hear her voice telling me to leave things alone like she always had. I started the engine and pulled out of the lot. Soldiers were still jogging along the fence line, chanting cadence. The base looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, but for me, everything had shifted. I drove past the visitor center and saw the same bench where Arthur had sat. For a second, I pictured him there again, folder in his lap, patient and stubborn. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Tomorrow, I would have to walk back into the general's office with something real to show him. Tonight, I had a house to drive to, a mother to help, and a sister whose name had just appeared on a suspicious contract. I didn't slow down. The road off base stretched ahead, lined with pine trees and old billboards. My reflection in the windshield looked calm, but my mind was running faster than any cadence outside. The next day, I walked into the secure office before sunrise, coffee in one hand and a folder under my arm. The building was quiet, except for the low hum of ventilation. I badged in, sat at the workstation, and opened the laptop. The screen filled with contract data and scanned PDFs. It felt less like a logistics job and more like a forensic lab. I started with the Trident Apex files again. Their contracts went back 2 decades, sprawling across supply, IT, and training support. A few lines jumped out: consulting fees with vague descriptions, payments to multiple small LLCs with addresses in North Carolina. I highlighted every one. Then I logged into the personnel records portal with the credentials Major Breyer had given me. This was supposed to be for cross-checking vendor contacts, but it also included the digital archive of awards and commendations. I typed my father's name. A bare-bones entry appeared. Rank, dates of service, basic awards, nothing else. No mention of the nomination Arthur had shown me. I pulled up the scanned microfiche for 2001. Thousands of pages. It was like searching a warehouse with a flashlight. I clicked through until my eyes blurred. Finally, a memo popped up from the 504th Parachute Infantry recommending Staff Sergeant Miles Whitaker for a Distinguished Service Medal. Status approved. A second memo dated 2 weeks later. No record found. Then nothing. I took screenshots and saved them to an encrypted folder. The metadata showed the files had been digitized by an outside contractor, Trident Apex Systems. My stomach tightened. At 9 sharp, Breer appeared in the doorway. "You ready for the general?" "Yes, sir." We walked to the command wing. Huxley's aide ushered us in. The general sat at the conference table, sleeves rolled up, a legal pad in front of him. He didn't waste time on small talk. "Report," he said. I laid out the highlights: duplicate invoices, non-competitive awards, consulting fees routed to small LLCs. I handed over a printed summary. "These aren't conclusions, sir. They're anomalies." He scanned the pages, his jaw tight. "And the personnel records?" "Sir, I found a gap in the digital files for the 504th. My father's commendation was approved but disappeared during the transition handled by Trident Apex." Huxley looked up sharply. "You're telling me the same contractor mishandling our current supply contracts also digitized your father's award?" "Yes, sir." Breyer shifted uncomfortably. Huxley tapped his pen. "Keep digging. Don't assume coincidence." "Yes, sir." He closed the folder. "From now on, you report directly to me on Trident Apex. Breyer will handle your other tasks." "Understood," I said. "Good. That will be all." Back in the secure office, Breyer exhaled. "You just stepped into a minefield," he said. "I didn't step into anything," I said quietly. "It was already there." He gave me a look, then left me alone. I turned back to the laptop. The deeper I went, the clearer the pattern became. Trident Apex had used a web of consultants to bill for non-existent services. Some of the LLC names were generic, others had faint personal connections to base staff. Each payment was just small enough to avoid audit flags, but together added up to millions. When I hit the entry for Sutton Strategic Advisors again, I opened the business registry. It listed Paige Sutton as managing member. Start date 6 months after Dad's death. Services, logistics consulting, no details. I rubbed my eyes and kept working. It was past noon when Arthur Bellamy's email arrived. He'd managed to get into a records appointment later that week and attached scanned affidavits from 2 other retirees confirming my father's nomination. I saved them, printed copies, and added them to the folder. At one, I met with a civilian auditor assigned to the task force. He was an older man with a task and the cautious tone of someone who'd seen too much. I showed him the flagged contracts without mentioning my family. "This is ugly," he muttered, but not surprising. "Contractors get cozy with commands all the time." "Can we prove fraud?" I asked. "Proof is a big word," he said. "You need original documents, signatures, bank records. Without that, it's just bad bookkeeping." I thanked him and returned to my desk. If original documents were the key, I needed to find them before someone made them disappear. By mid-afternoon, I had built a timeline showing Trident Apex's entry into Fort Liberty contracts, the disappearance of my father's award, and the creation of Page's LLC. The overlap was glaring. I stared at the screen, thinking about my sister's warning to leave it alone. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "Don't forget Mom's prescription on your way." The timing made me laugh under my breath. I finished the day by filing a formal request through the Army record system for hard copies of the 504th commendations from 2001. It was a routine request on paper, but my hands shook as I typed. At 17:30, I shut down the laptop and slipped the folder into a locked cabinet. As I left the office, the hallway echoed with boots and muted conversation. A group of junior soldiers passed, joking about rations. I envied their lightness. Outside, the sky was overcast, the parade field empty except for a few runners. I walked toward the parking lot, my mind full of numbers, signatures, and the old photo Arthur had shown me. Halfway to my car, I heard someone call my name. Turning, I saw Arthur standing by the fence in a windbreaker, his truck parked nearby. He lifted a hand. I crossed over. "You didn't have to come back." I signed. "I had to drop off more papers for the records office," he signed, "and I wanted to see if you were okay." "I'm fine," I signed back. "Working on it." He studied my face. "You look like your father when he was on to something," he signed. I gave a small, crooked smile. "Let's hope I'm better at paperwork than he was." Arthur laughed silently. "Keep copies of everything," he signed. "Never give them your only proof." I nodded. "Thank you for the affidavits. They help. Anything you need, just ask," he signed. "We're not done yet." I watched him climb back into his truck and drive off. The wind picked up, rattling the chain-link fence. I stood there for a long moment, the smell of jet fuel from the airfield drifting across the lot. My phone buzzed again, this time with an email alert from the record system acknowledging my request. I tucked it away. Back in my car, I set the folder on the passenger seat and started the engine. The radio played some country song about family and duty. I turned it down and focused on the road out of the base. Headlights cutting through the gray evening. The supply warehouses, the motor pool, the old brick barracks slid past. All of it looked the same to anyone else. To me, every building now felt like a box hiding someone's secret. I drove on without slowing, the folder shifting slightly with each turn, my mind tracing the paper trail I'd begun to unravel. The drive to my mother's house that weekend was quiet, except for the low hum of the tires on the highway. I had the folder on the back seat under a jacket, my phone muted. As I turned onto the familiar street lined with modest ranch houses, I felt my shoulders tense. Page's SUV was already in the driveway. I parked and sat for a second, breathing through my nose. Then I got out, grabbed the groceries Mom had asked for, and walked up the path. The door opened before I could knock. Paige stood there in a crisp blouse and jeans, her hair pulled back like she was headed to a board meeting instead of visiting our sick mother. "You're late," she said flatly. "Traffic," I said, stepping past her. "Where's Mom resting?" Paige replied. She had a rough night. I set the groceries on the kitchen counter and started unpacking. Paige leaned against the fridge, arms crossed. "You've been busy," she said. I kept my eyes on the bread. "Work is work. Don't play dumb, June. Word travels. The general himself pulled you onto some special team. What are you really doing?" I closed the cabinet slowly. "Reviewing contracts." "Which contracts?" she pressed. I turned to face her. "Why?" She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "Because my name came up, didn't it?" The kitchen felt suddenly smaller. "Paige," she held up a hand. "Don't. I told you years ago to leave Dad's records alone. There are things you don't understand." "Then explain them," I said. Her voice dropped. "When Dad died, we were drowning in bills. Trident Apex offered me a consulting contract. They said they'd help push through some back pay, maybe get Mom's benefits reinstated. All I had to do was advise them on base procedures. It was legal. Was it? I asked. Yes, she snapped. I didn't touch Dad's files. I didn't make anything disappear. I was trying to keep this family afloat. I stepped closer. Paige, your company is listed as a recipient of fees tied to contracts under investigation. If that's not illegal, it's at least unethical. She looked away. You think you're some kind of hero now, wearing that uniform, digging through files. You don't know how the world works. People scratch each other's backs. That's how things get done. I kept my voice steady. That's how people lose their integrity. Her eyes flashed. Don't lecture me. You've been in the army long enough to know it's all politics. Mom's voice drifted from the hallway. Girls? We both turned. She was leaning on the doorframe, looking pale but alert. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, Mom, Paige said quickly. I forced a smile. I just brought the groceries. Mom shuffled back toward her room. Paige watched her go, then turned back to me. If you keep pushing this, you're going to destroy what's left of our family, she hissed. I'm not the one who took money from a contractor, I said quietly. Her jaw tightened. I can hire a lawyer. If you so much as mention my name in one of your reports, I'll make sure you're disciplined for conflict of interest. The threat hung in the air. I picked up the grocery bag and started putting items in the pantry. Do what you need to do, I said. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Paige grabbed her purse. I have a meeting. Tell Mom I'll call her later. She brushed past me and out the door. I stood alone in the kitchen, my hands shaking as I stacked cans on the shelf. The house smelled like the same lemon cleaner Mom had used when we were kids. I remembered the nights Dad came home late from the base, boots muddy, voice tired but warm. We'd sit at this table and he'd tell us to look out for each other. I put the last item away and went to Mom's room. She was sitting on the edge of the bed. She's upset, Mom said softly. She'll be fine, I said. Mom looked at me with tired eyes. Your sister carried a lot after your father passed. We all did. I know, I said, but carrying a lot doesn't excuse everything. She reached for my hand. Don't lose each other over this. I squeezed her fingers gently. I'll do what's right, Mom. I stayed with her until she fell asleep, then went out to the porch. The evening air was cool, cicadas buzzing in the trees. My phone buzzed with an email from the records office. They had scheduled Arthur's appointment for Tuesday morning and would need a liaison from our task force. I leaned against the railing and read the message twice. Being liaison meant I could be there to translate and watch the process. It also meant my name would be on any notes taken. Inside, Mom's television murmured low. I took a deep breath and looked out at the street. Neighbors were mowing lawns, kids riding bikes, the same normal scene as always. Yet my family was now part of a contractor's paperwork maze. I pulled my notebook from my bag and started listing what I knew. Trident Apex handled Dad's digitization. Paige's LLC received payments labeled consulting. Arthur and other retirees had affidavits about the missing commendation. General Huxley wanted answers. I closed the notebook and stared at the ink on my hands. Every piece of this mess was connected by lines I couldn't yet draw but felt in my bones. A car slowed in front of the house. For a second, I thought Paige had come back, but it was just a neighbor. I went back inside and cleaned up the kitchen, careful not to wake Mom. Later, as I lay on the couch with my jacket over me, I stared at the ceiling fan turning lazily above. The sound of it mixed with the faint tick of the kitchen clock. I thought about Dad's photo on my desk at work and Arthur's warning to keep copies of everything. I reached into my bag and touched the folder hidden inside. Even through the canvas, I could feel the edges of the paper like a live wire. I arrived back at Fort Liberty before sunrise, badge clipped to my collar and a fresh notebook in my hand. The air was damp with coastal humidity and the base was already stirring, trucks rumbling, soldiers jogging in formation. I parked near the admin building, locked my car, and walked toward the secure entrance. My pulse was steady, but my jaw was tight. In the task force office, the civilian auditor was pouring stale coffee into a mug. He raised an eyebrow. You're early. Big day, I said, setting my bag down. We've got a retiree coming in, Arthur Bellamy. He nodded. We'll see if Records actually talks to him this time. I logged onto the laptop and checked the visitor schedule. Arthur was due at 0900 to present his evidence. My job was to escort him and interpret as needed. I pulled up his documents one more time to refresh my memory, making sure I had the affidavits, the scanned memos, and my own notes. At 08:55, the security desk called to say our visitor had arrived. I walked down to the lobby. Arthur was standing near the metal detector, holding his folder like a shield. He looked more relaxed than last time, but his eyes flicked around the room. I waved to get his attention and signed. "Good morning." "Good morning," he signed back. "Thank you for doing this. Let's go upstairs," I signed. "They're waiting." We passed through security, the guard glancing at my badge and then at Arthur's retiree ID. Upstairs, a junior sergeant from personnel records met us outside a conference room. He looked nervous. "Ma'am, the inspector from CID is observing today," he said quietly. "That's fine," I said. "We're ready." Inside, a CID investigator in plain clothes sat at the table, a legal pad in front of her. The sergeant introduced her as Investigator Lewis. She shook Arthur's hand, then looked at me. "You'll be interpreting?" "Yes, ma'am." We all sat. Arthur laid out his documents, and I began interpreting his statements into spoken English. He described his service with the 504th, the events leading to my father's nomination, and the disappearance of the commendation. Lewis asked questions, and I signed them to Arthur. He responded calmly, his hands precise. As the meeting went on, the sergeant pulled up digital records on a laptop to compare. The gaps Arthur described matched exactly what I had found. Lewis took notes quickly but didn't show much emotion. After an hour, Arthur handed over the affidavits from the two other retirees. I translated his closing remark. "We're not looking for special treatment. We just want the record to reflect what happened." Lewis nodded. "We'll review these materials and request additional files from the archive." Arthur thanked her. I signed it. When the meeting ended, I walked Arthur back to the lobby. He looked at me, hands paused mid-sign. "You're risking a lot for this." He signed. "I'm doing my job." I signed back. He gave a small smile. "So is your father." I watched him leave the building, then returned upstairs. Investigator Lewis was standing at the coffee station, scrolling on her phone. She looked up. "Lieutenant, can I speak with you privately?" "Of course." We stepped into a side office. She shut the door. "I can't tell you details, but what you're flagging is not small. We're opening a preliminary case file. You'll be listed as a point of contact." I nodded slowly. "Understood." She studied me. "One more thing. Family connections can complicate these things. Be careful." "I know," I said. She left, heels clicking down the hall. Back at my desk, the auditor leaned over. "What'd she say?" "That they're opening a file?" I said quietly. He whistled under his breath. "Buckle up." I spent the rest of the morning combing through more contracts. The deeper I dug, the more patterns emerged. Overlapping invoices, repeated signatures from the same approving official. One name popped up repeatedly, a mid-level civilian in the base administration office. I cross-referenced his signature with the personnel roster. He'd been in charge of records back in 2001 during the digitization. Now, he approved Trident Apex invoices. That was a direct link between the lost commendation and current contracts. I printed the documents and highlighted the names. The auditor leaned over my shoulder. "That's your guy," he said. "It's not proof yet," I replied. "It's a start," he said. At lunch, I walked outside for air. The parade field shimmered in the heat. Soldiers jogged past, chanting, their cadence sharp. I took a long drink from my water bottle and thought about Paige. If this investigation moved forward, her name would inevitably surface. When I got back, my email had a new message from the Judge Advocate General's office. I had asked for guidance about whistleblower rights when the potential subject was a family member. The reply was clear. "If you believe you have a conflict of interest, disclose it to your chain of command immediately. You are protected when reporting suspected fraud, but you must separate personal matters from official duties." I stared at the screen. My stomach felt like a stone. Breyer appeared at my door. "The general wants an update at 1600, he said. "I'll be ready," I said. He hesitated. "Whitaker, you're stepping into something ugly. Don't get burned." "I'll be fine," I said. He left. I spent the next few hours preparing a concise briefing. I removed any mention of Paige's company for now and focused on the contractor's patterns and the administrative link. I included Arthur's affidavits and the digital record gap. At 1600, I walked to Huxley's office. He was at the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the field. He turned as I entered. "Report," he said. I laid out the findings. careful and factual. He listened without interrupting, then asked a few pointed questions about the administrative official's role. I answered each one. Finally, he said, "Good work. We'll let CID handle the personnel issues. You keep tracking the paper." Understood. "Yes, sir." He nodded. Dismissed. I left his office and walked back to the task force space. The auditor gave me a questioning look. I just sat down and started typing notes from memory. By the time I logged off, the sun was low and the building mostly empty. I packed my bag, locked the folder inside, and headed out. Outside, the air smelled of cut grass and fuel. A helicopter lifted off from the airfield, blades chopping. I walked to my car, passing soldiers smoking near the fence. They didn't look twice at me. As I slid behind the wheel, I felt the weight of the day settle in my chest. Arthur's steady hands, Paige's hard eyes, Lewis's warning, Huxley's orders, each piece part of a puzzle I couldn't yet see but was already assembling. I started the engine, the dashboard lights flickering on. The base gate ahead was open, traffic moving slowly out to the main road. I shifted into gear and joined the line, eyes on the fading light over the pines, hands steady on the wheel. Rain started just as I reached the base parking lot the next morning. By the time I swiped into the task force office, my boots were damp and my hair stuck to my collar. The civilian auditor was already at his desk, a stack of printouts in front of him. "Morning," he said. I dug deeper into Trident Apex overnight. "You'll want to see this." He slid a folder across. Inside were flowcharts showing how the company's consultants linked to small businesses around Fayetteville, Raleigh, and even D.C. One of the boxes had a name I recognized, the administrative official from Base Records. Another box connected to Sutton Strategic Advisors, Pages LLC. I felt my throat tighten but kept my face neutral. "This is helpful," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "Helpful? It's a roadmap to fraud." I booted up my laptop and opened the secure server. My plan was to line up each suspicious payment with a specific contract deliverable showing that the services billed never existed. The auditor worked alongside me, muttering about shell companies. At 0930, Investigator Lewis from CID walked in unannounced. "Morning," she said. "We've got subpoenas for bank records and email accounts on the main suspects. Can you give me your top 3 priority targets?" I handed her a list. The administrative official, the Trident Apex program manager, and one of the LLC's funneling payments. I left Paige's company off the official list for now, but flagged it in my private notes. Lewis scanned the names. "We'll start here. You're doing good work, Lieutenant, but be aware when we serve these, people will know they're under scrutiny." "Understood," I said. She left as quickly as she'd arrived. By mid-morning, I had built a spreadsheet with each questionable payment, vendor name, approving official, and lack of deliverables. It was a lattice of dates and numbers that painted a clear picture. Trident Apex had turned base logistics into a cash machine. The auditor leaned back. "If CID gets the bank records, we'll be able to match deposits to personal accounts. That's when the walls start closing in." I nodded but said nothing. My stomach churned at the thought of Paige's account statements sitting on an investigator's desk. At lunch, I met Arthur outside the records building. He was there to follow up on his commendation file. I signed a quick hello and we walked under the awning to stay dry. "How's it going in there?" He signed fast. I signed back. "CID is issuing subpoenas." He gave a small smile. "About time. Are you ready for what might come out?" I signed. "I served long enough to know nothing stays hidden forever," he signed. "But it still hurts." We parted ways and I went back inside. My inbox had exploded with messages from Breyer and Huxley's aide asking for updates. I wrote a concise report and attached the spreadsheet. At 1400, Breyer stopped by my cubicle. "The general wants you at a closed-door briefing in 1 hour," he said. "Topic, Trident Apex," he said simply. I spent the next hour organizing my materials into a binder, leaving out any mention of Paige, but including the full picture of the contractor's network. At 1500, I walked into the briefing room. Huxley sat at the head of the table, Lewis on his left, Breyer on his right. A few other senior staffers were present. "Lieutenant Whitaker," Huxley said, "show us what you've got." I distributed the binders and began. My voice stayed even as I walked them through the timeline. Trident Apex's initial entry, expansion into multiple service areas, creation of shell LLCs, approval by the same official who had handled digitization of personnel files. I explained how each payment coincided with no deliverables and how the funds flowed outward. Lewis added that subpoenas had been served that morning. Huxley listened without interruption, his expression hard. When I finished, he said, "What about the smaller LLCs? Any personal ties?" I hesitated, then said, "Several are linked to former base employees and local family members. We're still mapping ownership." He caught my eye for a moment, then nodded. "Good, continue." Lewis closed her folder. "Sir, this is enough for a formal investigation. We'll need continued access to base systems and contractor files." "You'll have it," Huxley said. "Lieutenant Whitaker, you're authorized to support CID full-time on this matter." "Yes, sir." The briefing ended. As we filed out, Lewis touched my arm. "You handled that well," she said quietly. "Thank you," I said. Back at my desk, I sat for a long moment staring at the screen. Page's company name glared from my private notes like a warning light. The auditor wandered by. "You look like you swallowed a grenade," he said. "Just thinking," I said. He shrugged. "Thinking's dangerous. Paper's safer." I cracked a small smile despite myself and went back to work. As the afternoon wore on, more emails poured in. Questions from auditors, document requests from CID, scheduling for interviews with contractors. The scope was widening fast. At 1700, my phone buzzed with a text from Page. "Mom says you're working crazy hours. Take care of yourself. No mention of our last conversation." I stared at it, then put the phone face down. Before leaving, I printed another set of the spreadsheet and locked it in my personal cabinet. Arthur's words echoed in my head. "Keep copies of everything." Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky was heavy and low. I walked across the lot, boots leaving dark prints on the concrete. A helicopter thumped overhead, banking toward the airfield. I paused by the fence, watching soldiers in ponchos load gear into trucks. The base looked like any other day, routine, ordered, predictable, but beneath it, a web of fraud and betrayal was being pulled into the open. I adjusted my bag on my shoulder and headed for my car, my mind still tracing the lines between contracts, bank records, and family ties. 2 nights later, I drove to a small diner off Highway 87, where Page had asked to meet. The neon sign flickered, throwing red light across the wet asphalt. I parked, shut off the engine, and sat for a second with my hands on the wheel. Inside, the diner was mostly empty, just a few truckers at the counter and a waitress refilling coffee. Page was in a booth near the back, blazer draped over the seat like she'd come straight from a meeting. I walked over and slid into the booth across from her. She didn't smile. "Thanks for coming," she said. "You said it was urgent," I replied. She wrapped her hands around a mug. "It is. I got a call from a friend who does compliance work. CID is pulling bank records from companies tied to Trident Apex. Mine's on the list." I didn't answer. Her eyes searched my face. "Was that you?" "I'm part of the task force," I said evenly. "They issue their own subpoenas." She leaned forward. "June, listen to me. You're walking into something you don't understand. These contracts touch people way above your pay grade. You're not going to save Dad's honor. You're going to burn yourself." I kept my voice calm. "It's not about saving Dad's honor anymore. It's about fraud and abuse of veterans. The evidence is there." She shook her head. "You always were the idealist." I stared at her. "And you always thought bending rules was smart business." Page's jaw tightened. "I didn't bend rules. I took an opportunity. Trident Apex needed local insight. I provided it. Everything was above board." "No." I slid a printout across the table, one of the spreadsheets from my private notes with her company's name highlighted. "These payments match invoices for services that don't exist." She glanced at it, then pushed it back. "You don't know the full story." "Then tell me," I said. Her eyes dropped to her coffee. "They promised me if I helped, they'd expedite Dad's back pay and Mom's benefits. They never did, but by then I was tied in. I thought I could control it. I was wrong." I let out a slow breath. "Paige, you're admitting to a federal crime." She looked up sharply. "Don't act like a cop. You're my sister." "I'm a commissioned officer," I said quietly, "and you're listed on payments under investigation. I can't ignore that." Her voice cracked. "I was trying to keep us from losing the house. I was trying to keep Mom out of debt collectors' calls. And you were gone at school, then in the Army. You don't know what it was like. I know what Dad taught us. Do the right thing even when no one's watching." She gave a bitter laugh. "You think the Army lives by that? You think your 4-star general does?" I straightened. This isn't about him. It's about you and me. The waitress came by with a coffee pot. We both shook our heads. Paige lowered her voice. If you turn in everything you have, my name will be on it. I could be charged. I could go to prison. I folded my hands. I haven't named you yet, but if CID connects the dots, they'll find you without my help. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. Don't do this, June. I'm not doing anything to you, I said. I'm doing my job. She reached across the table, fingers brushing mine. Please, we're all Mom has left. I pulled my hand back gently. Mom deserves the truth. Dad deserves the truth, and veterans deserve a system that isn't bleeding them dry. For a moment, she looked like she might scream. Then she slumped back against the booth. You've changed, she muttered. I grew up, I said. She stared at me, then pushed out of the booth. I need to go. I stood as she did. Paige. She put on her blazer, shoulders squared. If my lawyer contacts you, don't answer. Then she walked out into the night. I sat back down, heart pounding, the printout still on the table. The waitress approached cautiously. You okay, honey? Yeah, I said. Just the check, please. I paid and left. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the pavement was slick under the neon glow. I got in my car, started the engine, and sat with my hands on the wheel until the tremor left them. Back on base the next morning, I went straight to the task force office. Investigator Lewis was already there looking at a map of payment flows. We got more records overnight, she said. It's blowing open. I logged in and saw the new data. More LLCs, more signatures. The administrative official's name was all over it. Paige's company was listed among secondary recipients not yet highlighted. I kept my voice neutral. Any big surprises? Lewis shrugged. Too early to tell, but someone's been tampering with digital personnel files for years. That's obstruction, not just fraud. The auditor came over. We've got enough here to trigger suspension of Trident Apex contracts. I nodded, focusing on the screen. At noon, Breer called me into his office. He closed the door. The general is considering a public announcement about the task force. If he does, the press will start digging. Your name could come up. I understand, I said. He studied me. Is there anything you need to disclose about conflicts of interest? I looked him in the eye. Not at this time, sir. He nodded slowly. All right, keep your head down and do your work. I returned to my desk and opened the latest batch of emails. One from Arthur popped up, found another photo from 2001, shows original signature on commendation memo. I downloaded it, compared it to the digital version in the system, and saw the difference immediately. The signature had been replaced in the scanned copy. That was direct evidence of tampering. I printed it and added it to my binder. My hands were steady now. By late afternoon, the office buzzed with controlled chaos. CID agents coming in and out, auditors running queries, Breer on the phone. I kept working, eyes on the data, ears tuning out the noise. At 5, I shut down my laptop, locked up my binder, and walked out into the warm evening. Helicopters thumped overhead, and somewhere on the parade field a drill sergeant barked orders. The base looked the same, but to me it felt like the ground was shifting underfoot. I crossed the parking lot to my car, the air thick with the smell of pine and fuel, my mind on the diner, Paige's face and the evidence now sitting in my locked cabinet. Morning sun spilled across the parade field as I walked toward the CID building with a thick binder under my arm. Today wasn't another staff briefing. Today was the closed-door hearing where CID, the Inspector General and Army Legal Counsel, would question witnesses under oath. Arthur was already inside waiting to testify. My stomach stayed calm, but every step felt measured. A sergeant at the door checked my badge and waved me through. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and paper. A conference room had been transformed into a formal proceedings space. Long table, 2 flags at the end, stenographer seated off to the side, typing steadily. General Huxley sat quietly at the back, not at the head. He wore his uniform coat today, ribbons perfectly aligned, eyes steady. Investigator Lewis gestured me to a seat. You're up after Mr. Bellamy, she murmured. I opened my binder and laid out the tabs. Payment flows, affidavits, digital record discrepancies, bank transfers, original signatures. Everything was in order. Across the table sat the base administrative official, the Trident Apex program manager, and 2 lawyers in suits, contractor counsel. They whispered among themselves, glancing at the exhibits. Arthur entered from a side door accompanied by a clerk. He took the witness seat, raised his right hand, and was sworn in. I moved to the interpreter's chair next to him. For the next 45 minutes, I signed the questions from CID attorneys and voiced Arthur's responses. He described his service, my father's nomination, the missing award, and the pattern of contractor influence. He stayed calm even as contractor counsel tried to poke holes in his memory. When asked to identify signatures, Arthur leaned forward and tapped the original memo he brought. "This is the signature from 2001, I voiced. "It does not match the digitized version currently in the system." The stenographer's keys clattered faster. CID attorneys entered both versions into evidence. The contractor's lawyers objected but were overruled. When Arthur finished, he signed. "That's all I know. I just want the truth recorded." I voiced it, and the room went silent for a moment. Then the chairperson thanked him and excused him. He squeezed my hand before leaving, his face composed. Lewis signaled me to move to the main table. "Lieutenant Whitaker, please take the witness seat." Did. The oath felt heavy but steady on my tongue. CID counsel began. "Lieutenant, describe your role on the Logistics Transparency Task Force." "I review contracts, vendor invoices, and associated personnel records for irregularities," I said. They walked me through each anomaly I had discovered: duplicate invoices, shell LLCs, approval signatures. I answered directly, sticking to facts, dates, and exhibits. My voice didn't waver. Then they asked, "Did you personally benefit from any of these contracts?" "No," I said firmly. "Do you have any personal relationship with any of the named LLC owners?" I hesitated a fraction of a second. One of the LLCs, Sutton Strategic Advisors, is managed by my sister. I disclosed this to my supervisor and removed myself from any decision-making regarding that entity. The contractor's lawyer pounced. "Isn't it true, Lieutenant, that your investigation targets your own family?" "I am not targeting anyone," I said evenly. "I'm reporting facts." He tried another angle. "Couldn't your personal feelings about your father's commendation influence your judgment?" I met his eyes. "That's why I document every finding and keep independent corroboration. The evidence stands without me." The chairperson cut him off. "Move on." They shifted to the digital record gap. I described how the commendation memo vanished during Trident Apex's digitization and how signatures had been altered. I produced the original photo Arthur had given me and the system copy for comparison. The difference was obvious even from across the room. Lewis entered a chain of custody form showing how Trident Apex handled the files. "This indicates tampering," she said aloud. The administrative official shifted in his seat, glancing at his attorney. Sweat beaded at his temple. One of the CID attorneys turned to him. "Would you like to explain how these records were altered under your supervision?" His lawyer whispered urgently, but the official spoke anyway. "I was told to expedite the scanning. I didn't review every document." "That's not the question." The attorney said, "Who directed you to remove or change signatures?" He swallowed. "I can't." His lawyer cut him off. "My client invokes his rights and will not answer further questions at this time." The room buzzed with low voices. The chairperson banged a small gavel. "Order." I sat still, hands folded on the table. They dismissed me as a witness but asked me to remain for the rest of the session. Contractor counsel began making statements about misunderstandings and standard industry practices. CID attorneys countered with exhibits and timelines. It wasn't a trial, but the tension felt like one. Huxley remained silent in the back, arms crossed. His eyes moved from speaker to speaker, absorbing everything. After a recess, Lewis presented the bank record summaries from the first subpoenas, transfers from Trident Apex to the administrative official's personal account, to 2 other shell companies, and to Sutton Strategic Advisors. The contractor lawyers objected again, overruled again. My pulse stayed steady, but inside I felt the world tilt. Page's name was now on official evidence in a federal investigation. Lewis concluded, "These records show a pattern of fraud, conflict of interest, and obstruction of official files." The chairperson announced that the hearing would continue with further witnesses over the coming days and that CID would move forward with formal charges where appropriate. As people stood to leave, Huxley finally spoke, his voice calm but carrying. "Thank you all. This command will not tolerate exploitation of veterans or manipulation of records. Lieutenant Whitaker, Mr. Bellamy, well done." Arthur had slipped back into the room quietly and now stood near the door. He gave me a small nod. I gathered my binder, the weight of it heavier than before, and walked out into the hallway. The air felt cooler there. the fluorescent lights buzzing softly. Arthur caught up to me. "You did well," he signed. "Did I?" I signed back. "You told the truth," he signed. "That matters." I exhaled and adjusted the strap of my bag. Soldiers and civilians passed in the corridor, heads down, unaware of what had just unfolded behind the closed doors. Outside, the sun was bright, but the wind carried a chill. We walked together to the parking lot. Helicopters clattered somewhere in the distance. Arthur headed to his truck, I to my car. I opened the door, set the binder on the seat, and looked back once. Arthur raised a hand. I raised mine. Then I slid behind the wheel, started the engine, and eased into traffic, the base receding in the rearview mirror while my mind stayed fixed on the facts laid bare in that room. Rain slicked the post road as I pulled into the task force parking lot the following week. Binder on the passenger seat filled with fresh updates. Inside the office, the mood was charged. CID agents moved in and out carrying boxes of seized files. The civilian auditor sat at his desk, grinning like someone who just won a bet. "They're freezing Trident Apex contracts," he said when I walked by. CID already recommended suspension pending charges. Headquarters signed off this morning. I hung my damp jacket on the chair. "How far does it go?" "Bank accounts, company assets, all of it," he said. "Even the admin official's been escorted off base." I logged into my workstation. A message from Huxley's aide blinked at the top. "General requests a brief at 1400 RE Award Restoration." My breath caught for a second. The morning passed with calls from CID coordination with the VA and finishing a final report on the commendation. At lunch, Arthur appeared at the lobby security desk. I went down to sign him in. They called me. He signed, eyes bright. "They're restoring your father's medal. Ceremony next week. You need to be there." For a moment, I couldn't sign back. Then I managed. "Thank you for pushing this." He smiled. "You did it." Back upstairs, I sat at my desk and typed a memo to the general summarizing the medal case. Original nomination, disappearance during digitization, affidavits, tampered files. I attached the scanned original and the corrected record from the archive. At 1400, I walked into Huxley's office. He was at his desk reading without looking up. He said, "Sit." I sat. He closed the folder and met my eyes. CID's case is moving, contractors suspended, indictments coming. The VA and Army Board for Correction of Military Records reviewed your father's file and approved reinstating his Distinguished Service Medal. They're scheduling a presentation for next week. I thought you should know, before it hits the wires. My throat tightened. "Thank you, sir." He leaned back. "Don't thank me. You and Bellamy did the work. I just gave you cover." I managed a small smile. He continued, "You've proven a point about inclusion, about paying attention. Most people walk past a problem. You stopped. That matters." I nodded. "Yes, sir." He tapped his pen on the desk. "What are your plans after this task force wraps?" I hesitated. "I haven't thought that far." "You should," he said. "We're creating a permanent ethics and accessibility office for the Corps. You'd be good at it." I blinked. "See, think about it," he said. "Now go finish your report." Back in the office, the auditor handed me a printed news article. Federal investigation targets Trident Apex systems. The headline sat above a photo of the contractor's headquarters. My eyes drifted to a line halfway down. A related company managed by a family member of an Army officer is also under review. No names yet. I folded the paper and set it aside. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of document uploads, phone calls, and preparing the ceremony details. When I finally left, dusk had settled over the base. The next week, the medal ceremony took place in a modest hall on post. Rows of chairs filled with soldiers, retirees, and a few civilians. Arthur sat in the front row, hands folded. Mom sat beside him, looking frail but proud. Paige was absent. I stood at the back until a public affairs officer motioned me forward to sit with my family. The hum of quiet conversation filled the room. On the stage, a table held the Distinguished Service Medal in a velvet box. General Huxley entered the room standing until he reached the podium. He spoke briefly about service, integrity, and the importance of honoring those who served. Then he called Mom forward to accept the medal on Dad's behalf. As the applause swelled, Arthur signed across the aisle. He would be proud. I signed back. We did it. Mom's hands trembled as she held the box. Tears shone in her eyes. For the first time in years, I saw her shoulders lift. Afterward, soldiers and retirees came up to shake Arthur's hand and speak with Mom. Huxley approached me quietly. "Good work, Lieutenant," he said. "You changed more than one record." "Thank you, sir," I said. He glanced around. "Where's your sister?" I shook my head. She couldn't make it. He gave me a long look but said nothing. Later that day, CID released a public statement confirming the suspension of Trident Apex contracts and ongoing charges against several individuals, including the administrative official and 2 contractor executives. My phone buzzed with messages from reporters, none of which I answered. At home that night, Mom set the medal on the kitchen table under the light. "Your father's name is cleared," she said softly. Arthur raised a glass of iced tea. "To Miles," he said. We all echoed it. My phone vibrated with a text from Paige. Saw the news. "I'm sorry, just 2 words, no excuses." I put the phone face down and focused on Mom and Arthur, the medal between us. The following morning, I was back at work. The task force office felt different, less frantic, but more purposeful. Soldiers were still lined up outside with files, but now they looked at me like I was someone to trust, not just another officer. Breer walked past and said, "Nice ceremony yesterday." "Thank you," I said. "General wants you to draft the new ethics and accessibility policy," he added. "You're the model officer now." I raised an eyebrow. "That's a stretch." He grinned. "Don't argue, just write it." I opened a blank document and began outlining training modules for contract oversight, whistleblower protection, and visitor accessibility. Each section came from something I had lived the past months. By noon, I had the skeleton of a policy that would outlast my assignment. Arthur texted to say, "The veterans group at the VA wanted me to speak at an upcoming event about transparency." I said yes. When I stepped outside for air, the sky was clear for the first time in days. Soldiers were running drills on the field. Somewhere, a band practiced for a change of command ceremony. The base looked ordinary, but to me, it felt like something had shifted. Not just a medal restored, but a culture moving 1 inch closer to accountability. I walked back inside, the sound of boots on tile steady, the weight of the binder finally beginning to ease. 6 months after the medal ceremony, the morning sun glinted off new signage outside the Fort Liberty Community Center, Veterans Access and Inclusion Program. Inside, rows of folding chairs faced a modest stage where a banner read, "Welcome home deaf and disabled veterans." The smell of fresh coffee mixed with polish from the newly painted walls. I stood near the back of the room in my duty uniform, scanning the crowd. Retired soldiers with canes, young service members in wheelchairs, spouses, and local volunteers filled the seats. Arthur Bellamy stood at the podium flipping through his notes. He caught my eye and signed a quick hello before turning back to his papers. Mom sat in the second row, medal pinned to her blouse. She was healthier now, cheeks less pale. Around her sat several soldiers from my unit who had helped with the program rollout. The low murmur of conversation was steady but warm. When the public affairs officer announced the start, Arthur stepped to the microphone. He didn't speak. Instead, an interpreter voiced his words while he signed. He told the room about his decades in uniform, the challenges of navigating military bureaucracy as a deaf veteran, and the difference it made when someone simply paid attention. As he signed, I watched soldiers in the audience lean forward, their expressions softening. A few tried to mirror his signs. The interpreter finished with his closing line. "Inclusion is not charity, it's respect." The room erupted in applause, hands waving in the air, the deaf sign for clapping. Arthur stepped back, smiling, and gestured for me to join him on stage. My boots clicked on the polished floor as I walked up. I turned to the crowd and spoke plainly. This program started because of one conversation in a lobby. We saw what wasn't working and fixed it. Today, Fort Liberty is committing to making access and respect part of our culture, not an afterthought. I described the new policies, visual alert systems installed across the base, interpreters at command briefings, mandatory inclusion training for officers and civilians, and a hotline for veterans needing help navigating benefits. "These aren't extras," I said. "They're basics." When I finished, the applause rose again. Arthur shook my hand, then signed quietly. "You did it." I signed back. "We did it." After the event, clusters of attendees gathered around tables with coffee and donuts. Soldiers practiced simple signs from the pamphlets we'd handed out. A young corporal approached me shyly and signed "Thank you" with both hands. Outside the building, the parade field shimmered in the spring light. Mom walked beside me, her steps slow but steady. "Your father would be proud," she said softly. I hope so, I replied. A black sedan pulled up near the curb. General Huxley stepped out. No entourage, just a folder under his arm. He approached with an easy stride. Lieutenant, he said. General, I said. He glanced at the bustling crowd inside. Quite a change from a few months ago. Yes, sir. You've built something lasting, he said. The Corps will keep this program permanently, and your Ethics and Accessibility Office goes live next month. You'll have a team and a budget. Thank you, sir, I said. He smiled faintly. Don't thank me. You earned it. He shook Mom's hand, nodded to Arthur through the window, then walked off toward his car. Mom squeezed my arm. He seems proud of you. I exhaled. It's been a long road. Later that afternoon, I drove to Mom's house. The kitchen table still bore a faint ring where the metal box had sat. Paige was there, sitting quietly with a mug of tea. She looked tired, her blazer gone, hair loose around her shoulders. Hi, she said. Hi, I replied, setting down my bag. She stood. I wanted to talk before you left again. I nodded. She stayed standing, eyes fixed on the floor. I'm cooperating with investigators. My lawyer negotiated a deal. I'll pay restitution and testify. I won't go to prison if I keep my side of it. I listened. She looked up. I'm sorry, June, for everything. I thought I was protecting us. I wasn't, I said quietly. Thank you for telling the truth. She gave a small, shaky laugh. You really became Dad's daughter, didn't you? I managed a smile. So did you once? We stood there for a moment, the kitchen quiet, except for the clock ticking. Finally, she said, If you want me to leave, I will. Mom's making dinner. She blinked, then nodded. That evening, we ate together at the same table where Dad used to tell stories from the base. Conversation was halting but real about Mom's health, about Arthur's speech, about changes on post. For the first time in years, Paige didn't look like an adversary, but like a sister who'd lost her way. Later, as I drove back to my apartment near base, the sky was streaked with orange and purple. The radio played a song about coming home. My phone buzzed with a message from a captain on my new team asking about training schedules. I typed back at a red light. Start Monday, excited. At the main gate, the guards saluted and waved me through. I slowed near the parade field. Arthur stood at the edge talking with a group of young soldiers who had just learned their first phrases in ASL. I parked, got out, and walked over. He turned, saw me, and signed, Beautiful day. I signed back yes and added, Thank you, with both hands. He smiled. You're the one who made this happen, he signed. I shook my head. We all did. We stood in silence for a moment, watching soldiers run drills under the lowering sun. Flags snapped in the breeze. For the first time in months, my chest felt light. When Arthur left, I stayed a while longer on the edge of the field. Around me, the base moved on, trucks rolling past, a bugle call in the distance. I thought of Dad, of Mom at the table, of Paige starting over, of the veterans inside the new program building. Revenge had never been the point. What started as uncovering a wrong had become building something right. I raised my hand and signed a simple hello toward the horizon, a quiet salute to all of it, then turned back toward my car, boots crunching on the gravel, ready for whatever came next. Driving back across the base that night, I realized the investigation had ended, but the work hadn't. What began as a simple gesture to a deaf veteran had unraveled years of fraud, forced my family to face the truth, and built a program that will outlive my assignment. Watching Arthur speak to young soldiers earlier, seeing Mom smile again, and knowing Paige had chosen to cooperate instead of hide, I felt the weight of revenge dissolve into something steadier, accountability. My father's name was restored, but more importantly, the culture around me shifted from looking away to looking closer. That was the real victory,